Hello everyone, welcome back to Kulu Education. Together we learn. You are here with myself, Josh Gary, and we're going to be learning about Black people in Roman Britain. Our key question today is this: how has the presence of Africans in Roman Britain been proven by historians? Now, to help me deliver this lesson, I have used this book here created by Collins. It's called Black British History Key Stage 3. It's a teacher resource pack, and it was created by a number of friends of mine. Emily Foloroncha, Dr. Simon Henderson, and Tenny Gogo. These are, some really, really important people in the history community, and I will be using lessons and resources from this pack to help me deliver some of my content. Now, our key question then: how has the presence of Africans in Roman Britain been proven by historians? Before we begin, there are a couple of things that you will need. You will need a piece of paper, and you'll also need a pencil. So please make sure you get a piece of paper and pencil. Pause the video whilst you go and collect those. Okay, so lesson 1, Black people in Roman Britain. And straight in front of you, you have a screenshot from a YouTube video created by BBC Teach looking at life in Roman Britain. Is there anything that surprises you? Is there anything that might seem out of place? If you have any of those thoughts, you wouldn't be the only one. When I first saw this video, it was quite accurate, it was quite clear to me, but there are a number of people who in fact actually criticized this video and said this cannot be an accurate depiction, an accurate showing of Roman Britain. Now we're going to ask ourselves, how can we prove that this video is in fact an accurate reflection of Roman Britain? So a couple of key questions we're going to be asking before we move on, or some key questions we're going to answer by the end of this lesson. We're going to ask ourselves, who were the Black people in Roman Britain? How did they get to Britain? Why on earth did they come to Britain in the first place? And what were they treated like? Were they slaves? Were they poor? Did they experience racism? These are all questions that we're going to hopefully answer by the end of the lesson. And you have two images in front of you. You have the Roman general Septimius Severus, who was originally from Libya, and he was one of the Roman generals in Britain. And you also have somebody just below known as the Ivy Bangle lady, her skeleton was discovered in 1901 in York. And she was known to be actually quite wealthy, but I don't want to get into them too much now. We're going to find out a bit more about them afterwards. Let's progress and see if we can answer some of these questions by the end of the lesson. Keywords, some keywords that we need to make sure we understand or we get to terms with if we're going to really understand this lesson. Our key terms: you've got the key term migration and you've got diaspora. Now, migration is simply the movement of people from one place to another. Now, people migrate for all kinds of reasons, and people have been migrating to Britain for over 1,000 years. Sometimes people migrate because they're a part of a larger empire. We'll find out a little bit about the Roman Empire a bit later. But some of you may have heard about the British Empire as well. Some people might move because of work. They may come to Britain or various other countries for work. This is in fact normal, and it's happened throughout time. Also, some people might migrate because of persecution. They may be targeted wrongfully in their country because of the color of their skin, their religious beliefs, for example, or simply who they are, their ethnicity, right? This results in them becoming refugees. Now, nobody is born as a refugee. You become a refugee as a result of persecution. And this can happen to anyone. It can happen to me. It can happen to anyone throughout the world. And finally, diaspora, a population or group of people that have once lived in one place, but who have since been scattered and live in multiple places. And now the African diaspora comes to mind immediately. You have the Asian diaspora as well, and people have moved for various different reasons. With the African diaspora, you have migration as a result of, or people scattered as a result of what we call colonialism, people being forcefully moved because they were once a part of the British Empire. But equally, there's been migration for work and various other reasons. So we'll find out a bit more about this as we progress through our series. Now, just to check our understanding, what does a migration mean? Option 1, staying in one country. Option 2, moving to a country. Option 3, learning a different language. Or option 4, not learning a new language at all. Now pause the video and see if you can get the right answer. If you put option 2, you are correct. Migration is simply moving from one country to another country. Now, look at this map and what might these shaded regions have in common? Look at it closely. We've got various different regions. Our geography is going to have to help us here. We've got Britain, for example, well, the southern part of Britain, which has been shaded. We've got various parts of Africa. We've got various parts of Europe, and we've got parts of what we call Asia Minor. Now, the key thing is these are all linked because at one point in history, they were a part of the Roman Empire. And this helps to explain why we had the migration of Africans living in Britain. There were Africans who were part of the Roman Empire. That's right. There had been African soldiers and African citizens, or Roman citizens from Africa, should I say. And they moved from one part of the empire to the other. And this was quite common. For example, as we have Septimius Severus, who's from what is today Libya, North Africa. He actually migrated from Libya and he lived in Britain for a time being. Now, the Romans first conquered Britain in 43 AD. The first recorded African community in Britain were serving on Hadrian's Wall, and they were known as the Aurelian Moors. The wall was built in the years after Britain was conquered, after 43 AD, and it was designed to control trade and also movement across the borders. Before the Romans came to Britain, you actually had a group known as the Celts. And in order for the Romans to protect what they have conquered, they needed to make sure that they can control who came in, who came out, and who invaded them. Now you might be asking, why would Romans invade Britain? Well, at the time, Britain had a number of natural resources, such as tin. And tin was something that the Romans would use in order to help them trade and gain wealth. Now, pause the video and let's see if you can answer these 3 questions. When was Hadrian's Wall built? What was the role of the soldiers who were there stationed at the wall? And who were the first group of African people known to have lived in Roman Britain? Okay, now we've learned a little bit about why Africans lived in Roman Britain. But the question you might be asking is, how do you know? How do we know that any of this is real? Now, step forward the Ivory Bangle Lady. Now, the skeleton of Ivory Bangle Lady was discovered in York in 1901. And prior to modern day technology, there was a historian known as Peter Fryer, and he actually found the skeletons of these Africans, and he made a judgment that they were likely from Africa. These skeletons in York were likely from Africa. Now, back in that time, we didn't quite have the technology to prove what was once an assumption or a hunch held by historian Peter Fryer. However, since then, we have new technology to help us identify these skeletons and identify where exactly they are from. Now, historians tend to use 2 different techniques. They use craniometrics. Now, that looks at the proportions of bones or proportions of the skeleton, and by looking at the proportions of the skeleton, you can help to identify where in the world these skeletons may have been from. And finally, you have isotope analysis. Now, what isotope analysis does is it looks at the teeth and it looks at the kind of food that somebody has eaten. And by looking at the food eaten by people, you can identify where they were from. Now, this helps to explain to us how we know Ivory Bangle Lady was in fact a mixed heritage or a mixed race person living in Roman Britain. One of her parents was certainly from Africa, and another one of her parents may have been from Europe. Now, I guess a question we might ask ourselves is, okay, so how was Ivory Bangle Lady treated? Did she experience racism? Was she a slave? Well, the truth is, historians have found that color was not very, very important in Roman Britain. You had hair, you had eye color, but what really, separated someone from another person would once be, whether they were a Roman citizen or not. And then you look at something known as their rank or their social class, their position in society. Now, historians believe that Ivory Bangle Lady was actually quite wealthy, and they believe this because of what was found in her sarcophagus or her tomb when we discovered her skeleton. Now, there are various bits of jewelry, and her skeleton was laid in a particular way. Now, if she was a slave or if she was very poor, she wouldn't have had a number of these different items with her. And this helps her, prove that she wasn't in fact poor. Very, very important. Now, recently or not too long ago, a video was produced that showed people Roman Britain. It was created by the BBC. Now, I'd like you to pause this and go on YouTube and see if you can find it. I'd like you to watch it and ask yourself, how accurate do you think this portrayal of Roman Britain actually is? Now, pause the video and let's see if we can answer some of these questions, though, before we move on. So pause the video and let's see if we can answer these questions. What we need to ask ourselves is, what techniques have historians and archaeologists used to discover the Black presence in Roman Britain? Name two. If you can, write down the two techniques used by archaeologists and historians to find out. Pause the video, and once you've done that, press play and let's see if we can continue and move on. Okay, now that you've watched the video, let's see what some of the critics of Mary Beard have said. So these are some critics who commented on the video. The historian and television presenter said that she received a torrent of aggressive insults for days after she said a BBC Schools video that depicted a high-ranking soldier and father of a Roman Britain family as being Black to be pretty accurate. So this historian received criticism. Now I'm going to give you a bit of a challenge. Get a pen and paper, right? And write a response. How would you prove or support historian Mary Beard and prove that the video that we've watched of Roman Britain may in fact be accurate? What evidence do we have thinking about the techniques? Who do we know thinking about some of the key individuals? Why might some of these individuals have moved to Roman Britain? Think about these different answers, and hopefully this will help you in providing an explanation. Now, what I love about Roman Britons is the fact that it shows us, and in fact, it proves that the presence of Africans in Britain has pretty much always been there. Historian Peter Fryer said there were Africans in Britain before the Romans came, and the Roman Britons proved that. The Windrush was a significant and very, very important moment in British history. But this is not when or where the presence of Africans in British history actually began. And that is something I find so, so powerful. But we may have some questions. We may ask, okay, if there were Africans in Roman Britain, where were the Africans in medieval Britain? The truth is, I don't really know. I cannot give you a clear answer for that, but there are some thoughts I do have. One of the things I might say is, Blackness may not have been seen as a relevant point in the same way that we might see it today. We have very little evidence about any individuals who were poor in the Middle Ages. We only really know about, people who were incredibly wealthy, and so they may not have felt it important to really record the skin color. And people descended from Black Romans several centuries earlier would most likely look entirely different by the 15th century. It was almost a whole millennium after the Roman period ended. And in front of us, we've got two key individuals. At the bottom, we've got Francis Barber, and we've got his great-great-great-great-grandson, Cedric Barber. Now, if you looked at Cedric Barber, you'd have no knowledge whatsoever, no idea that he was in fact related to Francis Barber, who was a Black man. Now, I'm not entirely sure what happened, but this might explain why it was hard to identify some Africans living in Roman Britain. Please drop a like, and please subscribe, and please share my video, and please leave your thoughts. And thank you for enjoying this lesson, and please join back again next week when we look at some other topics in Black British history. Thank you very much.